Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 32 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of GT class race cars. And in this particular pick we are featuring a race car which is not only hugely popular, but also very, very successful, not just in the game, but also in real life. In fact, this car actually won the Le Mans 24-hour race. And the car is, of course, the McLaren F1, specifically the GTR. Not the GTR Longtail though, not the finer version from BMW. This is available from the McLaren dealership, and it's a very strong all-round contender. But considering that it costs 1.75 million credits, you'd expect it to be, considering that that is almost LMP money. So for that price, what do you get? Well, when Gordon Murray designed the McLaren F1, he wanted to have a car that could not only be a fantastic racing machine, but something that you could also drive to the racetrack in. In fact, his ethos behind the car was that he wanted to create a vehicle which could be the ultimate driver's car on the road, but then be able to drive to a racetrack, win the race, and then drive home again. Something which race cars just can't do anymore due to the rules and the way they're built. The McLaren could actually do that. Now, of course, in racing form, it wouldn't be quite street legal, but that's still there in the design. It's perfectly capable of doing that, and that's pretty much perfect for an endurance race car. You need something that is capable of that, something which can run with the best of them when pushed hard, but that also lasts a long race. Because in a race that's as grueling as the Le Mans 24-hour race, it's not always speed that lets you down. Sometimes it's just reliability. You could have an otherwise amazing car, and this has happened virtually every year that the Le Mans has taken place, that there are amazingly fast cars that just don't finish because they break down. In the late 90s, for instance, Toyota almost won in the TS20, but they had a tyre blowout. That's not something you can prepare for, and it's not something any amount of performance can overcome. So the McLaren, due to also chance, not having a tyre blowout, that kind of stuff, but also due to sheer ability, won the Le Mans. And it's one of the most respected supercars ever made, so naturally as a race car, you'd expect it to be very good. Now, we've already featured the version that's in the BMW dealership in this series, and that car does have some very distinct advantages over this model. Most significantly, the weight. It's very light, well under 1,000 kilos, and this car is heavier. It weighs 1,050, which still isn't heavy, but it is heavier. Now, this of course is also a different McLaren F1 in terms of its appearance. It's the same vehicle underneath, but it doesn't have the long tail body style, which, as well as having, as the name implies, a longer tail, also has a more extended, more aerodynamic nose cone. So what kind of difference does that make? Well, it actually does make a difference. The car does handle differently to the finer version available in the BMW dealership. It has slightly different specs, but even apart from that, the handling does feel sharper, more controlled, more focused, and more involved to the driver. The fact that it's a premium also helps in that regard, but the long tail does feel a bit stiffer, especially at high speed, and that can be a good thing. You need that stability at high speeds, especially in real life, rather than in the game. The short tail version, which is this car, is also very good in its own way though. The fact that it is a shorter vehicle, despite being heavier, means that it's more nimble, especially in very low speed corners or on tracks where the long tail just isn't practical, such as ultra tight circuits like Monaco. This car will easily dominate the long tail around that kind of track, a track where just the sheer size of the GTR long tail makes it cumbersome. Now, even though this is inferior in some ways as far as raw spec, it's still a very strong car all round. It has a 6.1 litre BMW V12 engine, 910 horsepower, fully tuned, 663 foot-pounds of torque, and as we already mentioned, it only weighs 1,050 kilos, and as such, it puts out a massive 867 horsepower per tonne. Not the highest in the class, but very high nonetheless. The PP is also very high, not surprising really, 674, which, given how strong an all-rounder the McLaren F1 is, that's actually not too bad. There are quite a few other GTs which are even higher than that, which would have a very tough time beating this car. And one of the best things about the McLaren F1, and I would actually say more so with this model than with the Longtail, is that it's good at everything. That's what makes the McLaren such a formidable opponent. Many cars have good straight line performance or good handling. This has both, and that makes it very difficult to best. And even when you do beat it, it's usually not by much. I actually raced a Lister Storm race car on Gran Turismo 6 against one of these in a 1-hour endurance around the Daytona road course, and I did beat it in the Lister Storm, but only by around 3 seconds over the course of an hour. So the potential of the McLaren really is there. Even if you beat it, it's usually not by much. It's always a threat, kind of like the Nissan GTR. Even if you beat it, it's always got the pressure right there on you all the time. Now, as far as performance, you could probably assume that this car might not be that great. It doesn't look like the kind of race car that would necessarily be that good for top-end performance, especially given that the road version isn't as quick as you might expect it to be on Gran Turismo 6. But it's actually not bad. With low aero and more stretched out gearing, you can get this car to do around 250 under its own power, and that is not bad at all. Now, it's not primarily a car that I would recommend for its straight line performance. It would be better for a track which requires a bit of both, such as the Le Mans, but primarily with the chicanes on the straight. Overall, it is pretty expensive for the class, but it pretty much goes without saying that I would definitely recommend it. And I don't use cockpit mode, ever. But this is one car that I do like to use it on, because the central driving position along with the fully detailed interior makes it a really fun place to be. So I definitely recommend checking this car out. And that's it for this episode overall, so I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.